Erev Shabbat Shalom Rabotai. We are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Gittin. We are up to Perek Bet Mishnah Zayin. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'elu Nishmat Neria Ben Svetlana Ranbai V'Eliyahu Ben Burchai Israelov Chana Bat Miriam Zason Ben Raya and Yoshua Ben Shifra Menuchatam Began Eden Amen and Avdir Ben Chaim L'Chaim V'Derefua Shelemav Daniel Shalom Ben Rosa B'Tor Shah Cholei Israel. Although women are not generally accepted as witnesses, the law is different with respect to delivering a get. A woman may deliver a get and testify that it was written and signed in her presence, as Mishnah 5 taught. Everyone is qualified to bring a get. Our Mishnah elaborates on this law. Afa Nashim she'ena ne'emanot lomar met ba'ala. Even those women who are going to list below who are not trusted to say in court, her husband died and she is permitted to remarry. Now, although generally one witness, man or woman, is believed to testify that a man died, permitting his wife to remarry, these women are not, as the Mishnah says in Yevamot chapter 15, Mishnah 4, for the reason that will be explained below. Nevertheless, they are trusted to bring her get from overseas to Eretz Yisrael and testify that the get was written and signed in their presence. These women are Chamotah, Ubat Chamotah, V'tzaratah, V'ivimtah, Ubat Ba'alah. Her mother-in-law, her mother-in-law's daughter, meaning her husband's sister, her co-wife, meaning her husband's other wife, her husband's brother's wife, and her husband's daughter, meaning her stepdaughter. These 5 women are presumed to resent the wife. They are therefore not believed to testify that her husband died, because they are suspected of lying in order to ruin her by causing her to remarry unlawfully and suffer many penalties. Since they are assumed to dislike the wife, they are suspected of making up the story of the husband's death so that the wife will wrongly remarry, and that when the first husband reappears, she will become forbidden to both men and will need a divorce from both. She will also be subject to all the penalties listed in chapter 8, Mishnah 5, that are given to a woman who remarries without a divorce while her husband is still alive. The Rav over there in chapter 8, Mishnah 5 explains why each of these women often resents the wife. The mother-in-law resents her because she knows that eventually her son will inherit her property and his wife will then spend all her hard-earned money. Similarly, the husband's sister resents her because she knows that her brother, the husband, will eventually inherit her parents' money and his wife will then spend it all. Co-wives often resent each other because each deprives the other of some intimacy with the husband, and similarly, the husband's brother's wife resents her because she fears that if one of their husbands dies childless and his brother performs Yibum, she and her sister-in-law will become co-wives, and a stepdaughter resents the wife for taking the place of her own mother. The Mishnah explains what they are believed regarding a get. Ma ben get limita. What is the difference between a get about which these women are believed and the husband's death about which they are not believed? Meaning, why do we not suspect these women of lying about a get as well, so that she will remarry unlawfully? Sha'aktav mochiach. The difference is that the written document, the get, shows that they are telling the truth. The signed get that these women bring is the true evidence that this man is divorcing his wife. We therefore believe them to add the minor piece of testimony that the get is valid. We do not suspect that these women will go so far as to forge a get, as the Rambam writes in his commentary in Masechet Yevamot chapter 15, Mishnah 4. Regarding their testimony about the husband's death, however, we have only their word to go by, and since they are suspected of hating the wife, we cannot rely on what they say. Now, the wife herself can also serve as the husband's agent. The wife herself may bring a get from overseas to Eretz Yisrael and give it to the husband's agent to use to divorce her. Except that she must say upon delivery, the get was written in my presence and signed in my presence, like all agents who deliver a get. Now, the Mishnah refers to a case where the husband wants his wife to be divorced in a specific court in Eretz Yisrael. To this end, he made the wife his agent to deliver the get to that court, with instructions that they should appoint an agent to give it to her for a divorce. When the wife delivers the get to the court, she is just like any other agent who delivers a get from abroad and is required to testify to having witnessed its writing and signing. However, if she claims that she was divorced with the get she holds, she is fully believed and does not need to testify that she saw its writing and signing. Although the signatures have not been authenticated, since the get seems to be written and signed properly, we assume it is valid until someone challenges it, as the Rav explains and the Rambam writes in Ichud Girushin, chapter 7, Halakha 24. That is the end of Perek Bet Mishnah Zayin. We continue with Perek Gimel Mishnah Aleph. The Mishnah now returns to the rules of writing a get. It teaches about the intentions the writer must have when he writes the get. Kol get shenichtav shel ishum isha pasul. Any get that is not written for the sake of the woman being divorced with it is invalid. And the Mishnah explains this rule by citing 4 cases. Ketzad, how so? Haya over bashuk v'shema kol sofrim makrim. If a man was passing through the marketplace and he heard the sounds of scribes dictating the text of a sample get to their students, meaning a scribe was teaching his students how to write a get. To do so, he chooses a man's name, a woman's name, and the name of a town, and dictated them to the students to practice writing a standard get. Ish ploni migreshet plonit mimakom ploni. So-and-so, the man is divorcing so-and-so, the woman from such and such a place. It happens to be that the names of the man, woman, and town mentioned in the get correspond to his name, his wife's name, and his town. And he said, that is my name, and that is my wife's name, and that is the name of our town. And therefore he wants to use this get to divorce his wife. The law is that pasul garesh bo, this get is invalid for him to divorce her, to use to divorce her. A get must be written for the purpose of divorce, but this get was written simply for practice. This law is learned from the verse, and he, the husband, shall write for a document of separation in Dvarim, chapter 24, verse 1, which implies that the get must be written for the purpose of separating a wife from her husband, not for any other purpose. Yeter miken, a ruling that is more novel than this previous ruling, k'tab ligaresh bo et ishto, if a man wrote a get with which to divorce his wife in imlach, and he changed his mind and decided not to divorce her, mitzvah ben irov amarlo, and then a person in his town who wished to divorce his wife met him and said to him, shmi kishimcha v'shem ishti kishem ishtecha, my name is the name same as your name, and my wife's name is same as your wife's name, therefore let me use your get to divorce my wife. The law is that pasul geresh bo, this get is invalid for the second man to use to divorce his wife. Even though this get was indeed written for the purpose of divorce, it is invalid for the second man, because a get must also be written for the sake of the man who will use it. But in this case, it was written for the first man. This law is also learned from that verse that we cited, which says, and he shall write. This indicates that the man must write it for himself, or at least tell someone to do it on his behalf. A get written for a different man is therefore invalid. Yatel miken, a ruling more novel than this previous ruling. Hayirosh ten Nashim ushmoten shavin. If a man had two wives with the same name, k'tav ligaresh bo et hagdola, and he wrote a get with which to divorce the older wife, lo yigash et haktana bo et haktana. He cannot divorce the younger wife with it. Even though this get was written for the purpose of divorce and for the sake of the husband, it is still invalid for the younger wife, because the get must also be written for the sake of the specific woman being divorced with it. In this case, however, the husband wrote it for another wife by the same name. This law too is learned from the above verse, and he shall write for her, specifically for her sake. And the Mishnah speaks of his intention to divorce the older wife only by way of example. The law is the same regardless of which of the two wives he originally wanted to divorce. A get written for one wife cannot be used to divorce another. Yatel meken, a ruling more novel than this previous ruling. Amar lelavlar, if this man who had two wives with the same name said to the scribe, Ktov le'ezu shirtze agaresh, write a get for me and I will use it to divorce whichever wife I will choose. Pasul geresh bo, the get is invalid for him to use to divorce either wife. Even though this get was written for the wife he eventually decides to divorce, it is invalid because it was not specifically designated for either of the two wives at the time it was written. Although he said that it should be written for the wife he eventually decides to divorce, his later decision cannot retroactively establish that this is the wife for whom it was originally written. Therefore, it is considered a get that was not written for the woman's sake, and it is invalid. That is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Everybody should have an Erev Shabbat Shalom. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.